the last year has been quite tricky for all of us, but we have been all looking for different ways to exhibit and enjoy art, and at CADAF especially so. And I'm extremely happy to see fellow colleagues here and to discuss everything that has happened with us within this year. So I see Volkmar joining, and we also have Katya and Anton joining. Meanwhile, maybe I'll start with briefly introducing myself. So I run a contemporary digital art fair that we started in 2019. And we had a couple of physical editions, followed by a completely virtual edition this summer. And then this October, we're actually having a new initiative called Digital Art Month, where we will show diverse digital art, mostly in New York for the full month of October. Diverse, maybe not the best word because it's just two types actually. It's augmented reality and video art. We have partnered with different neighborhoods in the city, from Fifth Avenue, Madison Avenue, and so on, and we will have augmented reality works available through QR codes in different parts of the city. So that's a new fun way to enjoy art that I have found. But I'm curious to hear from colleagues here how they have been doing for the past year, and what has happened with them. But I think that first of all, it would be great if each of you can maybe introduce yourself so that everybody knows exactly whom they're dealing with. Volkmar is to my right, as it's maybe you would like to start.
Well, of course. Well, welcome. I'm glad to join. My name is Volkmar Klien. I'm an artist, composer, and I've been working in digital media or digital art for a long time. But surprisingly, I've been dealing with the kind of digital world much more the last couple of weeks, but months actually, really now. But generally speaking, I'm based in Vienna, and yeah, I think for an introduction it might be good enough.
That's perfect. Okay, Katya or Anton? Katya?
Yeah, I can start.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Katya Gause. I am based in Los Angeles. I have worked with Jeffrey Deitch for the last 6 years in a variety of roles. First at his gallery in New York, and most recently as the director of his gallery in Los Angeles. So I've had an interesting perspective of trying to navigate this transition from the physical to the digital rather suddenly, I guess. And I left over the summer to pursue different projects, but I still had a full look at the beginning of how all of this will start to move.
I guess I'm last. Oh, we're missing one person. I'm Anton Svyatsky. I'm the studio director of the artist collective AES+F and an independent curator, working a lot with digital media for the past 5 years.
That's great. I think we're waiting for Yng, but maybe we can jump to the first question and she will join once she joins, if she's able to join. And please, oh, here's Yng. Hi, Yng, good to see you. How are you? Good. So we're actually starting with introductions. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. I think I hit the wrong link to join. I hit as a spectator. Hi, everybody. My name is Yng-Ru Chen. You can call me Yng. I'm currently based in Boston, and I have a company called Praise Shadows Art Partners, and I work directly with artists to create collaborations and partnerships, primarily with fine artists, but also beyond. And I worked with Snark.art from the very beginning, and I am looking forward to joining everybody to talk a little bit about how this period has gone.
Great. So I guess let's start. So I think that the first question that comes to mind is, what has changed during this last year? Did anything change? How this changes reflect on your work and on what you see around you. So maybe each of you can contribute to that. And we can go in any order.
Let's make it clockwise.
Do we see the same kind of screen layout?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I don't know.
I think you're up.
So I'm number one.
Right.
If
Sounds good.
Well, the main thing that happened to me in whatever I did is that everything that used to be planning just disappeared, which was really confusing and liberating as well. For everything just didn't quite stay as planned, or it didn't evolve as planned. I mean, I was involved with Snark.art in a project called Sometimes 1,000 Quangling Instruments that we launched in a different form in the Momos collection, Decentraland, in I think April or May. So this wasn't at all influenced by, the end of life outside. Whereas all the other stuff just completely changed. I had a project that was planned as a live interventions theater, performative acts outside nature. We turned that into film clips, also as locative art form, where everybody brings a phone and there's a QR code, and that's in the sticks, that's in the Alps, and it's digital arts, it's public art, and it is outside in a nature reserve. So that was a surprise. I did live orchestras ensembles, which we did at the Ars Electronica. I'm also a professor in Linz, and we partner with Ars Electronica a lot, and they had the whole festival in a hybrid form. So in Austria, it was possible to have kind of very small audiences for a while. It's looking like this is going away again. But everything was live as well as online. But still, the dynamics of the festivals changed fundamentally. I mean, fundamentally, usually there's 100,000 people. The city felt empty and was empty for everybody. Of course, in a way, it grew. It was everywhere. But on the other hand, you also realize that digital is not quite the full substitute of the real. So as an artist, it has been for a long time, but it's even more so a challenge how to react and also undermine these strategies of kind of digital giants of how digital interaction should work. For everything looks like WebEx or Zoom work meetings now, which is super depressing as well, potentially. Liberating, enabling too, but also a bit shit. But so everything is very dynamic, let's put it this way now. Everything that's planning disappeared. Some of the projects everybody still hopes, Museum of Modern Art in Vienna, and we hope that in 1 month's time, there's still live audiences. Chances are slim, but we just ignore reality for now, for there isn't a digital substitute for that. But otherwise, everything is very, very dynamic. That's all, I guess, for now.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm wondering, for this live events, I'm particularly, of course, curious about the ones that involve the QR codes at this point, and the public art events. How did the audience react? Were they very happy to interact finally with the art in person? Were they excited about being?
Actually, that's really, I mean, we just did the opening 10 days ago, and so usually at the opening you get people who are interested, but it turned out to be a side product that is actually really interesting. So you get these film clips, these film scenes that were supposed, and you go there, you put your phone where the camera was, and then you watch whatever, you watch ghosts in the lake, like hybrid realities. And that was actually a charming find, for we wouldn't have done it this way. It's also so much more work than doing a live performance. Obviously, for you to film it, you need to edit it, blah, blah, blah. But this is something that actually turned out to be really a useful avenue we wouldn't have explored otherwise, I guess, but we were forced into that. And it's a good form of public art. It's actually tied to a physical location, and of course it's digital, it's hybrid, and it's an augmentation, and it's a lot of things all in one.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Michel Houellebecq, and when he said that nothing is fundamentally going to change, everything is just going to become a little bit worse. So
Okay.
that's kind of been my experience. Obviously, you know, things get canceled and moved and so on, but we did manage to somehow open a massive show in Beijing at Tang Contemporary that was like a monumental task and was open for only 2 weeks before it shut down again. So, and now that show is traveling to different institutions in China, in Sichuan, and we'll go somewhere else afterwards. But it just seems like, you know, the world is moving at a different pace. Like somehow before the pandemic, it felt like the world was one big connected place. You could get on a plane, you know, go to Bangkok, and time would be fluid. Whereas now, it just feels like everything is living in its own realm. So wherever you are, your personal reality doesn't seem to change. But if you travel a lot, it's like suddenly there's a lot of barriers, places you can't go, which I feel like maybe the internet is serving as this kind of substitute, but not really. It just reminds you that everything is shut down and everything is closed, right? It's like this lingering feeling um, that something is not right, that it's like a cheap substitute, sort of. I'd also, just to the point that Volkmar made, there's a lot of new interesting ways that are becoming prominent because of the pandemic, ways of showing art, let's say. But I think a distinction should be made between art that is made using digital tools and art that is meant to be experienced through digital means. Those are two very, very different things, and we shouldn't confuse them. I just saw a show by Jacoby Satterwhite in New York. I'm New York based, so I was just there not like 30 minutes ago for his opening, and I was the only person there basically. But the show is beautiful, and it's all made using digital tools, which is interesting because it's a physical space. All of the work is physical, like you have prints, sculptures, and so on. But it's a very different, and actually made me think about this as we talk on this panel about digital art. We have to make this distinction.
Right.
You know, be very aware about it.
I'd like to jump off of that and just say that I guess coming from the perspective of working in and running a physical space, when everything shut down, you had to fundamentally rethink how someone is able to engage with art. Because if you have a painting in front of you, you know, or rather, if you have a painting, standing in front of it is going to be a totally different experience than looking at it, you know, as a JPEG on a website, which is kind of all that we were left with starting in March, April. You know, it was like online exhibitions via websites. And so I think that it has offered this really interesting opportunity where now maybe art that is digitally native, not made using digital means, but made for a digital platform, can now become maybe more engaging for the average viewer, for whom like looking at an installation view of a room is not the same as visiting a show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And has any of these digital digital shows that were put together, did any of them seem engaging enough or fulfilling enough for either of you?
I think there are a few. I like the project that Transfer Gallery did. I don't remember the name, but it was very interesting. It was, you know, made to be art made to be experienced online. So it's natively digital platform art, so to speak. And there's also another one that Bitforms Gallery did, which was called Tree of Life, I think, that was made by Claudia Hart, which was also very interesting. And it was very different from the concept of the viewing room online, like the web page where they scatter JPEGs of various physical artworks, in the sense that every artwork was thoughtful about the platform it's being presented on. So like platform aware in a way. And there's very little of that. But I think that the pandemic gave new voices a chance, in the sense that audiences, have their eyeballs freed up to look at different things. Whereas before, they would go to Art Basel Miami and they'd look at the same thing every year. So
right, and no one wants to look at those same pictures on a website,
Well, I'm sure
like
some people
3 or 4
do.
times a year. Some people do, but I think that it's just not engaging in the way that I think that you would like.
Yeah.
You still have this barrier of a screen, rather than being engaging with something in the way that it was meant to be.
Yeah. I think the main problem is that when you're looking at art online, like physical art objects in their JPEG avatars, there's no like person next to you to explain and sell. Basically, that's the missing piece, right? The experience of communication, or the experience of joint experience of a place and an object, right? Because when you're by yourself sitting in front of a screen in your underwear and you're looking at JPEGs of monumental sculptures and you're like, oh, that's nice, but okay, let's go to the next viewing room. There's no real art experience.
I mean, but I think that's a really good point Katya did. You really have to have a distinction between digital access to art, right, whatever it was, as in virtual museums of the Metropolitan Museum.
Mm-hmm.
But that's more like, that's just digital access to something that's there already. Right. That's really, in a way, an augmentation, an educational tool, but a tool to reach out. But as an artist coming from a digital background, then you also have to see that there's a lot of different digital artworks. If you think about digital sound, digitally produced sound, basically it's a virtual reality, but what happens to you listening to it, it actually goes through you. It's a virtual reality, but it hits you as sound pressure. It goes through you, so it's a bodily experience. And you've got a very complex setup of virtuality, physical reality, concrete experiences. And this is something that needs to be brought into digital art on a fundamental level. Or it's just basically galleries struggling to kind of keep the business model going, basically while it's forbidden to have it out there. Then this will also always be the second best solution, or as a substitute or an add-on. But as an artist, the digital condition is in itself very interesting, with all its power structures, the scalability, the reach of specific components and so on. There's been a lot of net art around since the 1960s, probably, who knows, a long time. But basically that never had a chance to had a chance to flourish outside the arts market, let's put it that way. But there was a complete disconnect. There is no physical object, there's nothing to pass on, spend money, put it in store somewhere. So this is the point, I think, where Snark has been kind of one of the very early adopters of the whole idea of how to create something that is art in a digital realm, and that has still some sort of way to connect to a market situation, or also to reach out to people outside of the creators community, to basically adopt artwork. So that's also one of what we do as a collector. You look after it, you curate it in a way. And a curator means looking after it originally in Latin. So that's for me a very interesting aspect. A lot of it is second best what we're doing at the moment. I've just today seen a Berlin-based show that uses Mozilla Hubs, I guess, as an horrible, boring, awful. You walk through something that looks shit and awful. Yeah.
I mean, I will say that one of the really interesting factors over the last 6 months since everything shut down, at least here in the US in March, is how the threshold for perfection and for things that have to be wonderful, beautifully curated, brilliantly presented, that threshold has gone down, and I'm okay with that. You know, I enjoy actually seeing sometimes just mistakes or the experiment. I mean, you know, one of us might glitch at one point during this talk, and we are all accustomed to it.
I have construction just above me.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my kids are pounding their feet downstairs, which is why I was on mute before. You know, there's like, it's all real now, and we're kind of deeper into each other's lives than we were before. Which is to say that, like, I think that's changed a lot. I mean, I'm not an artist, but I work directly with so many artists who've had to kind of open up a little bit more of themselves during this time. And that often is only in a digital realm because, you know, they're not able to interact with anybody physically. So in a way, I think some artists' practices have also evolved, even if they weren't doing digital-based or native works before. You know, now they're having to, or now they see, in fact, some of the benefits of adopting some of, you know, whether it's just Instagram and doing talks or stories or whatnot, or actually starting to create more video. And I think that collectors and even folks who are just art appreciators are, you know, I like this. They like that it's a little bit more low-key and not geared toward that high-level collector that, you know, it's just, it can be for more of everybody now than it used to be. And, you know, I certainly think that's a welcome development. And especially for artists, it kind of brings the barrier of perfection down a little bit.
Right. I feel like before everything came to this sudden stop, there was a sense that things were accelerating and there were more art fairs every year and galleries were opening more and more locations. And you kind of thought to yourself, where is this all going to go? And like, how do we keep up with it all? And it's almost a welcome pause where you can say, okay, now we can all breathe and we can take it all in and we can connect with each other in the way that we wanted to connect, but maybe didn't have a chance to before just because there was so much noise around us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a lot of the clutter has gone away. I'm sure it'll come back. And there's also other clutter, you know, digital clutter that we have to deal with. But, you know, I remember the first thing I realized when everything hit and, you know, we were getting like emails from every single institution, every single thing we had ever subscribed to for the last 20 years, we were getting emails. And I was like, whoa, I subscribed to a lot. Unsubscribe, you know, like it was just kind of like a cleaning out of my digital life in a way, and then deciding what I wanted to keep and what I didn't. And for art, you know, it was also a shift in perspective of like, well, what do I really want to see now that I'm home and I might be sad or I feel I want to connect with people in a different way. You can't go to a museum or a gallery, you know, you can really just do it on a screen. And some things did not work. Like I remember the first few viewing rooms I saw for art fairs. I just didn't, you know, it didn't excite me. Like the VR stuff didn't excite me. And I think it's improved a little bit, but I'm still not going to art fairs to see art like that I want to see right now. You know, that is not the platform that I think is come out as like the top way of viewing art. But that's me. I don't know about you guys.
Mm-hmm. And I was curious, since kind of all this virtual environments has made art in general more accessible and available to the general audience, do you see any changes in your collector base or in general in people who reach out to you, or maybe even the artists who reach out to you to work with you? Has anyone noticed anything like that?
I think that when things shut down initially, we did see a lot more international activity. Whereas maybe before, most of the collectors that we would be working with would be based in the United States. I mean, there were a lot from Asia, from Europe that were all of a sudden reaching out to us. And so I guess, you know, it did open that space up. And now everyone all of a sudden is on Instagram and on their emails and they're seeing all of these images. So yeah, you do, I guess you do have a wider reach because of it in a way. Yeah.
I have kind of an interesting perspective because as part of my work, I have been also just doing marketing and PR consulting for galleries. And I initiated these Instagram live talks with museum curators and artists and directors. And in the early days of the pandemic, a lot of people were just telling me, especially the museums, that they were looking more regionally at what they were going to collect, what they were going to go see. And they're still telling me this, but this is because their travel budgets are slashed. You know, they don't feel like they can do proper studio visits with, you know, a sculptor or a painter or something like that right now. But also they're not necessarily going to be able to have the budgets to bring all these artworks to their institutions over the next few years. So, you know, I spoke to the chief curator of the Warhol Museum. He's like, I'm going to look locally and I'm excited to. This is something I'm going to discover. I'm here in Boston. The same curators are telling me that. So I actually think it's really exciting because, you know, there is more of a regional focus now in art centers around the world and around the country that in the past was only reflected primarily in LA and New York, probably. So it's like it's local, it's more regionalized, but it's also virtual. So I think that dynamic is really interesting, and I think it's a good balance.
Great. Well, I couldn't agree more. For me, this whole period has been very, very exciting, and I was actually curious about working with the city on some initiative. I've never even touched a public art project before, and I was surprised to see how open the city was to actually incorporating some art in the public areas, and that they're trying to bring some engagement like that to the city. That was very positive discovery for me.
That's great. Cheaper than installing a monument.
Yeah, I mean, a tag, yeah, exactly. Interesting. So I had in my questions also, I don't know how much time we actually have, but maybe for a couple more questions, if you are interested in speaking about the museum shows and sharing what you think will happen to them in the future, will there be a mix of online, offline? How do you feel about that? And in general, maybe thinking about the future, what the future holds for us, how things are gonna change after, maybe hopefully this is over someday.
I think the last couple of months have shown that it's very, very hard to, you know, foresee what's going to happen. So who knows? And I mean, being from Vienna, I've visited the Viennese museums when they reopened over the summer. No tourists, beautiful. I mean, a disaster for the museums, but actually really, really enjoyable. I mean, there was this weird acceleration of just movement on the planet in a way. And I'm sure it will go back to all the silliness we had as soon as it's possible. But just being able to go, I just live more or less next to the National Gallery where they've cleaned the case. So usually it's crowded. You have to get tickets for the 5 minutes to be pushed through the room. Nobody there. Wonderful. And of course, it's weird that I met so many people who actually had their livelihood taken away as performance artists or as musicians, basically. And they're poor, you know, they're not the arts market, they're the artists. So on average, they're piss poor anyway. And they still thought, like, nice. I mean, everything's falling apart, but for a bit, it's brilliant that things have changed and there is space in the museums that you've got time to just look at the thing and nothing else. So who knows? But to me, it's very hard to see how you could extend a physical museum into the virtual world and then still make money and not lose money from it. I don't, you know, I'm not an expert, but I'd be surprised to see anything around the corner.
I think it's important to be aware of the fact that we are experiencing some kind of shift in gatekeepers. So nothing fundamentally changed for artists. So whether before it were museums and galleries, physical places that would be able to control sort of the artist's reach, now it's platforms. So there's that, and I apologize if you guys hear this drilling, but there's nothing I can do about it. So it's important to acknowledge this kind of shift in power and how platforms are being empowered right now by necessity, and whether that's going to stay or not. Like, I'm willing to speculate that unless certain museums make or convert themselves into platforms, they're going to have a really hard time existing in the next 10 years. And that's the fundamental change.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think museums in the United States are in some ways positioned differently from those in other countries. But, as it is, museums here have so much to deal with just with its own institutional systems. And, they're thinking about their collections, they're rethinking, who sits on their boards. There's a fundamental shift in how the art world is going to, I hope, and I believe that this is going to happen, and how the art world is going to look. I was talking to somebody yesterday, like 10, 15 years ago, if you read an art magazine or paper, you kind of read about the same few artists constantly. And it was the mega artists, people only wanted to talk about the mega prices at auction. And while there is that for sure, there's also, I also think like Black Lives Matter changed a lot of things in America at the very least. And the way that artists are getting covered, who gets to write about that, it's all changing, which I think is wonderful. And just as Anton said, the gatekeepers are shifting because they kind of have to. And, hopefully the digital access component will be one of the big things that they also decide to integrate as a part of their mission for greater accessibility. But I don't know. I think that's a very forward-thinking museum. And I come from a museum background. Like, these things move really, really slow. So I don't know about Europe and where you are, Volkmar, but like, in Asia, a lot of the museums are privately owned, and it's just a different beast. So question-wise, I think the United States has potential, but they have a lot of big things to work out first.
Yeah. That being said, I do think that we are positioned at a moment where there is now so much momentum behind these things, where it is possible to actually see this kind of change. And at least with the shift to digital, it slowly, I think, has been happening over a number of years, and this just accelerated it. So I don't see why a museum or another institution having developed like a robust digital platform would shut that down and shift just back to the physical.
I agree.
Yeah. Although I guess it's just a matter of developing something maybe very comprehensive so that the audience can really enjoy it. Maybe we'll see. I haven't explored Snark's exhibits yet. I don't know if that's available yet, actually, to view some of the visual content. But
I mean, I think that for museums, people who work in the digital art realm kind of there's a lot of education that still has to happen towards museums. What does digital even mean to a museum? Some of them might only say, oh, right, it's just about getting social media really well up and running. Other museums, like the Whitney does a great job by, putting digital artworks right on the website as being part of its programming. And others will just think digital, we collect more. Like, just as you were saying, there's a difference between digital native and works that are made digitally but are not meant to be seen, on a screen. So, and when I was with Snark, we did a partnership with NADA in Miami. This was 2 years ago. It took me like 45 minutes to talk to a person about digital blockchain art, each and every time. And these are to collectors, so the people who are giving these museums money, well, they're collectors for the most part. They're also older, for someone to fund this kind of initiative, it will take like a very forward-looking, excited person, probably a younger person, but doesn't have to be.
I think the most fundamental question that we all have to ask ourselves is whether, if presented the chance, MoMA would acquire any CryptoKitties. I think it's very important because as like they collect culture, and now you have this completely alternative realm that has been developed that is arguably for a lot of people much more valuable, or at least as valuable as any physical painting or, you know, sculpture, whatever. So will the old gatekeepers acknowledge the new ones? Because the gate is still there. The gate's not going anywhere, right? So either everyone's going to stand there in front of the gate together, or some people are going to get moved. And that's where like the friction is. That's where the most important and like I don't know, exciting things are going to happen.
And also it will mean that any form of work, artistic work in the digital realm, will always also need to include a critique of the platforms.
Yeah.
Of the business model behind it. But basically, as an artist, if you change a bit of, you know, some bytes in the RAM of Facebook or Google, basically you're serving their business model much more than your own, and then, you know, sending anarchic messages via these channels is confusing, to say the least. So this will always need to be a focus in all development of these channels. And then also the gatekeeping becomes, of course, an issue again.
Yeah, I think we just have to remember the gatekeepers are all humans, you know, they're all people like us. So you might find one person that is totally down to collect CryptoKitties at MoMA, right? And it could be Paula Antonelli. I'm sure if she's given the chance to like listen to about this, she probably might. So I don't think it's out of the realm of any.
Is that a good thing?
Is that a good thing?
Yeah.
I mean, she collected emojis, right? So I'm like, you know, it's just, I mean, you know, she's a design curator. It just depends on what department.
I guess.
Unfortunately, I think it's time for us to wrap up, as I see. So it was a pleasure talking to all of you. Thank you for sharing your insights, and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.